You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and today I'm bringing you a wild courtroom partial conclusion to the Pike County Massacre. And you might know this case from April of 2016, where 8 people, all with ties to the Roden family, were shot and killed in 4 different homes. 7 of those murder victims were in 3 homes near each other on family land. The last victim was found shot in his camper in Piketon, Ohio. And it's fortuitous that I mentioned the Hatfields and the McCoys in the last episode when I was telling you about the rival paving companies. You know, those 6 men from 3 generations of one family business attacking members of another family business. Okay, there's a little bit of a similar theme here in the Pike County Massacre. 4 members of the Wagner family were eventually arrested and charged with the killings of the 8 members of the Roden family. All of that over the custody of one child and the dominance of generational families. Now, the sentencing hearings and the trial hearing on Friday were filled with drama. So let's get to the details. On the morning of April 22nd, 2016, a woman named Bobby and then eventually her brother James, they showed up at the Roden family land. Bobby was initially there alone, tasked to feed some of the dogs located at one of the homes. So Bobby, she's the sister to Dana Roden, and that's 37-year-old Dana Roden and 40-year-old Christopher Roden. They were once married for 22 years, but at the time of the murders, they were divorced and still living on the family land together, but in separate homes. In fact, Christopher Sr. had set Dana up in her new place because family's family in this incredibly small town. It's like one diner and no movie theater small. Now, Dana and Christopher Sr., they have 3 children, 19-year-old Hannah Roden, 16-year-old Christopher Roden Jr., and 20-year-old Frankie Roden. Okay, also living on the family land is Frankie's fiance, 20-year-old Hannah Gilly. She's living with Frankie on the land in a separate home. So yes, in this story, we have 2 Hannahs and 2 Christophers. So if I keep clarifying all the names here throughout the story, that's why. Also on the property that night is 38-year-old Gary Roden. Okay, that's Christopher Sr.'s cousin. So I've just named 7 people in 3 different trailers on the land. And Bobby, we're back to her, she's showing up to feed the pets. And it's early in the morning, about 7:30. So you wouldn't expect lots of stirring of all of these people, but Bobby is still a little concerned it's so quiet. As she enters one of the homes, she finds Christopher Sr. and his cousin Gary not just shot and killed. These men were slaughtered. Christopher Sr. has gunshot wounds to his head and his torso and his arms. And Gary, he's been shot execution style in the head, barrel right to the temple. Now, both men appeared to be sleeping in the home when they were ambushed and killed, but the scene makes it look like Christopher Sr. was probably stirred awake. The wound to his arm seems like defensive, and there's blood everywhere in the trailer, not just the bedrooms. Now, Bobby calls 911, but before first responders arrive, James shows up, and the 2 start checking the other homes on the property. Bobby ran to a nearby home, and there she found Frankie and his fiancée, Hannah Gilly, dead from gunshot wounds to the head. Again, presumably while they were sleeping. But they weren't alone in that trailer. 2 children were in the trailer as well, Frankie's 3-year-old and Frankie and Hannah's 6-month-old. In fact, the 3-year-old answered the door and said his daddy was playing zombies. This in a reference to the blood and the gore this poor child was seeing. Now, both children were unharmed. The 6-month-old was still in bed with Hannah. James ran to a 3rd home where he found Dana dead from a gunshot wound to the head and neck. Also sleeping in that trailer were Dana's children, Christopher Jr. and Hannah, both murdered by gunshots to the head. A child was in this home as well. Hannah Roden had just given birth to a baby 4 days prior. Now, I want to pause here I did lots of research study on this case. I found it reported that this baby was 3 days old, 4 days old, and 5 days old. I do not know which is exactly accurate. It is a brand new baby infant. That's the important part. Now, investigators believed that that baby was nursing at the time of Hannah's murder. Now, the 4-day-old baby was found covered in blood in the bed. So I've now listed 7 victims, all on family land. But I told you we have an 8th. Later that day, 44-year-old Kenneth Roden, now he's the brother of Christopher Sr., well, he was found dead by a cousin to the family in his camper in nearby Piketon from a single gunshot wound to his head. Now, for a brief moment, the idea of a possible potential murder-suicide plot was discussed by authorities, but that just wasn't adding up. None of the victims appeared to have self-inflicted wounds. Autopsies did discover that 32 shots were fired into the 8 victims, but not all the killings were quick. Some of the bodies were beaten and bruised, indicating to investigators that when these victims were awoken, they were physically attacked before finally being killed by the bullets. Now, can you imagine how this freaked the community out? A town with a couple of thousand people where no one locks their doors? Now, the first 2 homes on the Roden land, they were within walking distance of each other. But the other trailer, that was about a mile away on the property. And the camper, well, it was about 8 miles away. So these are your neighbors in rural Ohio. So whoever had this beef, well, they weren't just operating on opportunity. And what I mean is, this was calculated. The finding of the rodents and the slaughtering of them, all calculated because they had to go distances to get to these people. Now, pretty quickly, like within about a week, it was announced by investigators that the Roden family had some unique business interests. On the Roden land, investigators found hundreds of cannabis plants being cultivated in a grow house. Also on the land, chickens, but not the kind for egg collecting. These were a special breed of chickens known to be used in cockfighting. Investigators are left wondering if the Rodens are potentially wrapped up in maybe a Mexican drug cartel, and this could have been a cartel hit. Well, it wasn't the first time that cannabis operations had been found in Ohio connected to drug cartels. But Dana's father came out very quickly and said, not so fast. He explained that the dogs on the property did not attack the killers. And also, there were no signs of forced entry at any of the crime scenes. He also blamed Kenneth and Christopher Sr. for that cannabis operation, saying the other members of the family just really weren't involved and it wasn't, quote, a family business. Now, despite what Ohio authorities called an exhaustive investigation, things weren't progressing quickly in finding the murderer or murderers of the Roden family. But hints were being floated about, one of which was during a court hearing for 2 of the children left alone after the murders. The judge in that court hearing openly stated that the children were in grave danger because the killers were still roaming free. That was the first time it had been clarified that police believed there were multiple killers. Finally, 13 months after the killings, police and SWAT teams raided a home just 10 miles from the Roden family land. They were searching for evidence, not necessarily for people. Then a nearly duplicate search occurred in Adams County, this at a property once owned by a man named Jake Wagner. Okay, you knew I was getting there. How are the Wagners and the Rodens connected? Well, back when Jake and Hannah Roden were roughly about 13 years old, the two began a romantic relationship. That relationship produced a child for Jake and Hannah. That child was between 2 and 3 years old when the murders occurred. But remember, Hannah didn't have a about 3-year-old with her that night. She had a 4-day-old. And Jake isn't the father of that 4-day-old, and the other child wasn't at that home. Well, the gathering of evidence led to investigators asking for any information on the Wagner family. See, some of the Wagners had hightailed it out of not just the area, but out of the lower 48. Jake and his parents, Billy and Angela, had relocated to Alaska temporarily, and the police weren't being vague about what they wanted to know. They were asking for people to share with investigators any interactions, business or personal, that they might have shared with the Wagners. They were also specifically asking for conversations that might have anything to do with firearms or ammunition or cars or equipment. Do you get the hint here? They're looking for clues to the murders, and they're specifically probably looking for firearms or cars that could have been seen in the area. Well, it took another year and a half, and finally, in November of 2018, 6 members of the Wagner family were arrested. The patriarch, 47-year-old Billy Wagner, was arrested in Lexington, Kentucky. The matriarch, 48-year-old Angela Wagner, was arrested in Scioto? I hope I'm saying that right. Scioto County. And 27-year-old George, he's the son of Billy and Angela and the brother of Jake. Well, he was arrested during a traffic stop. So that leaves us with Jake, the guy whose former house was searched, and he's the connection between the Rodens and the Wagners. Well, the 26-year-old was arrested with his brother in that traffic stop. And it's important to note, all of them were arrested within minutes to hours of each other. This was a very organized arrest of this family. Now, all 4 obviously had made their way back from Alaska, and investigators felt like they now had enough evidence to prove that the 4 were involved in the murders. 2 more of the family members were arrested, though. First, Rita Newcomb. Okay, that's Angela's mother. And then Frederica Wagner. That's Billy's mother. Well, both were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing of justice. And there's a whole section of this podcast that I could go off on Frederica Wagner. This woman has a history in Pike County. But just let it be known, she's very powerful, very well known, and very connected in the community. All right. Back to the story. Authorities felt that these 2 mothers had covered the tracks of the 4 alleged murderers. All right, what's the theory? Well, all of these arrests, according to the multi-million-dollar investigation, well, they were because of the custody of that 3-year-old, Jake and Hannah's child. Okay, I want to remind everyone, this is such a quick retelling of what led us up to the courtroom drama that occurred last week. So if you're here for a 6-episode podcast, you can find that somewhere else on this massacre. But here, we're going to get to the end portion of it. That hearing that happened on Friday, or I should say 3 separate hearings that happened on Friday, that had all of these people in the same courtroom together. You need to know that since the slaughter that occurred in 2016, that was almost 9 years ago, that none of these people had seen each other. And on Friday, 3 of those 4 people accused of murdering the 8 others, well, they were back together in the same courtroom. Now, since their arrests, Billy, Angela, George, and Jake, they have been jailed and separated from each other. And Friday, it was a collision, kind of like an atomic explosion between the 3 people, Angela, Billy, and Jake, and members of the victims' families. This was their chance to speak. But we're missing somebody. We're missing Billy, the patriarch. Well, he's the only one of the 4 that has yet to either take a plea deal or face a trial. But we'll get to Billy in a second. Let's start with Jake. Now, the whole reason this slaughter occurred was apparently because of Jake. And Jake pled guilty to 18 counts, including aggravated murder. Jake has admitted that he shot and killed Dana and her 2 kids, Hannah and Chris Jr. He then admitted that he went to the other trailer and killed Frankie and his fiancée, Hannah Gilley. During his sentencing hearing on Friday, Jake spoke directly for 11 minutes to the surviving members of the Rodens family. He said he was sorry for what he had done, but he wasn't sorry that he had gotten caught. He said that he 100% believes it was Jesus who made it possible for investigators to build the case against him. He even claimed it was an answer to his prayer that he should be caught and charged and jailed. His religious pontification went on so long that the judge warned him twice to wrap it up. He closed his comments by asking all members of the courtroom to transform their lives and commit to Jesus. Then he said, quote, I pray for you all. Ultimately, Jake received a much lighter sentence than the Rhoden family desired. Now, how did that light sentence occur? Because he received 8 life sentences. That sounds like a lot, right? Except due to his cooperation and willingness to admit to killing the Rhodens, the judge ruled that Jake can get out of jail after just 32 years served. When that happens, Jake would be 64 years old if his parole is granted. He, of course, will have to face a parole board and earn that ability through his behavior. But those supporting the Rhodens weren't happy with this sentencing. And then there's Angela. Okay, that's Jake's mother. And by the way, the two of them shared several looks and glances in the courtroom on Friday. Apparently, they've been working together. Maybe their lawyers are talking. Maybe they're sending communication. I don't know. But they kind of appeared to be a team. Well, Angela, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison for her admittance to the murders. She's already served nearly 6 years, so she's expected to remain in prison for another 23-ish years. She admitted to helping prepare for the killings and also helping cover up the killings. During her sentencing, the judge admonished her for not stopping the evil actions, saying, as soon as her sons and husband left the house back in 2016, she could have called authorities and turned them in before the killings started. Now, Jake's brother George, his future isn't so soft. He was convicted on 22 charges, including 8 counts of aggravated murder. And that trial, it occurred back in 2022 because he didn't take a plea deal. And during that trial, Jake testified against his brother and Angela testified against her son. That's why those two got more lenient sentencing. George is basically sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after you add up all the individual sentences and other charges. And I want to remind you here, all of these, Jake, George, Angela, they could have been capital murder cases. So when I say the Rhoden family isn't so happy about these sentencings, that's why. There was a chance for capital murder here. Well, during George's trial, we learned that the weapons used in the murders of the 8 Rhoden family members were placed in buckets and then covered with concrete. Those concrete blocks were eventually turned into boat anchors, and they were gifted to a member of the Wagner family on Father's Day. Okay, I don't know if that meant that they were trying to create trophies for their kills, but that sure sounds like they had something weird going on. Now, Jake told the jury that those boat anchors were cut and dropped in a pond. Well, after he told everyone that, those anchors were recovered and the weapons were chipped out of the concrete. The weapons matched the shell casings found at the scenes of the murders. So we've taken care of the 3. We've got George, who went to trial, and he's in prison for life. We've got Jake and Angela with kind of lighter sentences. Now we've got Billy, the patriarch. Well, he's set to go to trial in 2025, possibly. His potential trial has been marred by appeal after appeal by his attorney. They've been fighting over whether his criminal enterprises could be included in the trial. Remember the marijuana and the cockfighting? Now, the prosecution is asking for Judge Hine to be removed from the case, saying he cannot remain neutral since hearing and, quote, advocating for the defense. So we've got both prosecution and defense upset in offering up appeals and motions, and that's why this has been delayed. Now, Judge Hine, he's temporarily removed the death penalty from Billy's charges. And the prosecution believes that the judge has purposely pushed out deadlines and hearings in regards to Billy, potentially making it possible for Billy to not go to trial. Now, the judge, on Friday, he refused to commit to a date for the trial. And that's drama, because this hearing was held in conjunction with the sentencings of Jake and Angela, because the trial was supposed to start today, just 3 days after Friday. So basically, the judge has been kicking the can down the road. But that wasn't the only drama, the only explosive drama that happened on Friday's hearings. A very, very passionate mother, Andrea Shoemaker, well, she stood and addressed the court and addressed Angela and Jake. Andrea is Hannah Gilley's mom and also the legal guardian of the children left behind in this whole mess. Here, I want you to give a listen to how she started her remarks on Friday.
She made her hand you three helped plan to carry out and murder my grandson. Ruger, who was 6 months old, laying in the bed between his mom and dad. Frankie, Roden, and Hazel Gilly. Let alone your granddaughter's mother. How greedy of a grandmother are you? How greedy. You killed your granddaughter's mother. You're evil. You're evil. You are the spawn of Satan. And the Satan is Billy Wagner. You are the evilest mother to help plan, carry out, take the life of 3 other mothers. My daughter was only 20, and you want 30 years of your life behind bars. 30? She was 20! 20! She never knew how to buy alcohol. She got 6 months of her life with her kids. 6 months. And Hannah Mae Roden, the love of your life, Jake Wagner. The love of your life. Your daughter's mother. She got 4 days. Kylie Roden got 4 days. Do you know what kind of questions I have to answer? First, it was bad people came in. Next, they see your faces on the news. So guess what? I had to explain more. Because they're not little kids no more. They're not 6 months old. They're not 4 days old. Ruger's soon to be 10. 10 years he's been without a daddy to teach him how to fish, to teach him how to do all the man things. He has to depend on uncles, cousins. Because of you, Jake. Greedy Jake Wagner. You.
I know you can hear the passion in her voice. She is violently shaking while delivering those remarks. Remember how Jake gave that 11-minute sermon-like speech to the judge in courtroom? Well, this passionate mother, Andrea, she walked out right at the beginning of that, refusing to listen to what Jake had to say. All right, we've still got 2 mothers of the Wagners who weren't charged with murder, but instead were charged with obstructing justice. All right, Rita Newcomb. She was sentenced and required to pay fines, and she is under adult supervision for 5 years. Here's the weird one. Ultimately, the charges against Frederica were dropped. Now remember, there's a whole bunch of rumors and drama about that because Frederica is so connected in the community and has done so much for the community, but also has her own little suspicions in her business operations. I don't have time to go into that here, but that would be an interesting rabbit hole to jump down. Okay, I will totally keep you updated on the trial that was supposed to start today for Patriarch Billy Wagner. I'll let you know when that trial actually happens and what the outcome is. All right, now to this story that's got me asking what's with the rivalry lately, because this one out of Texas has a rival goat raiser poisoning another goat. Okay, that's weird, I know. Let's get to it. Here's what's being alleged. 17-year-old Aubrey Van Landingham has been caught on surveillance footage at Vista Ridge High School in Cedar Park, Texas, allegedly poisoning a goat owned by a much younger student. Now, Aubrey is the president of her Future Farmers of America club at her school. She's also a very popular cheerleader. And this video footage shows her entering the barn with a syringe in her hand. She walks into the goat pen, straddles a goat named Willie that is owned by a younger girl, a younger student, and she forces the syringe into the goat's mouth 3 separate times. Now, Aubrey then exits the barn on the video, but she's seen returning multiple times to check on Willie. Eventually, after a few hours, Aubrey comes to check on Willie again, and when she enters the barn, she finds Willie shaking and convulsing. Aubrey then boldly calls the mother of the younger girl on FaceTime and showed the mother how Willie was acting sick. Well, that mother came to the barn and gathered up Willie because this is her daughter's goat, and she drove the goat to the veterinarian clinic. The mother, who understands farm animals, well, she was completely confused about what could be making Willie act so ill. And the vet, well, he was confused too because he couldn't figure out what was making Willie ill. So the student and the mother return Willie to the barn, and they watch over him for the next half a day or so. Sadly, on one of the visits to the barn, the girl found Willie bellowing in pain. She scooped him up, and several minutes later, Willie died in her arms. Willie was returned to the clinic where the doctor performed a necropsy and discovered a harsh chemical smell when Willie was cut open. Following tests, it was determined that Willie had been poisoned with phosmet. Okay, that's an insecticide typically used on fruit crops. After an investigation examining that surveillance footage from the barn, Aubrey, well, she was questioned by authorities where she confessed to the poisoning. And Aubrey said she poisoned Willie because the younger student was, quote, a cheater, and that Aubrey doesn't like cheaters. Now, in the questioning, Aubrey couldn't explain how the younger student was a cheater. She didn't know why she was calling her a cheater. She was just calling her a cheater. And she also couldn't explain how torturing and killing a goat fixed her idea that this student was a cheater. She did, however, admit that the poisoning attempt that was caught on video was not her first attempt at harming Willie. She allegedly said she had tried to harm the goat 3 days earlier, but she wasn't successful. So she upped the dosage and tried again. When Aubrey's phone history was audited, investigators found searches for how to poison pets and also how much bleach is needed to kill an animal. She also allegedly searched for how to clear her browsing history. Now, the poisoning, it somehow seems worse to me because Aubrey has her own beloved pet goat named Lacey. Before she deleted her Instagram account, that goat was prominently featured in posts sharing how Lacey, the goat, and Aubrey had won this ribbon at this fair and that grand prize at that fair. And by the way, some of those prizes in Texas are not little. The awards can range from a $50 cash prize for the animal owner to a possible $30,000 grand prize for the school's FFA program. Now, the mother of the younger girl, well, she's spoken about the incident to the Daily Mail. She told the outlet that she doesn't believe Aubrey is remorseful in any way and that her and her daughter hope she not only serves jail time, but that she also receives mental health care for her actions. The mother, well, she's also bothered that Aubrey and her daughter really didn't even know each other. They didn't interact. The age difference from freshman to senior in high school meant the two didn't really cross over. So for the mother, this all comes down to jealousy. Well, Aubrey was booked into the Williamson County Jail in December, and then she was bonded out by her family. She is set to appear in court on January 15th. If convicted for her felonies involving cruelty to animals, she could face up to 2 years in prison. Aubrey has now been banned from attending and graduating from her high school until this case is resolved. The school district said they can't comment on an ongoing investigation, but they did say they feel that the safety measures in place helped investigators, and they hope it will actually help complete the case. Well, I don't even know what to say, because on the outside, this girl looks as all-American as you can get. She's the poster child for all-American. If she's found guilty for this crime, it makes me feel like asking the question, can we trust anyone? And finally, this quick story about the callous remarks a drunk driver made after admitting to killing 2 teen boys. This all happened in May of 2023, when 36-year-old Singh Amandeep had spent the evening drinking scotch and tequila and also snorting cocaine at a couple of local bars on Long Island in New York. Clearly impaired, Singh got behind the wheel of his Dodge Ram pickup truck and drove down a city street at recorded high rates of speed. In his path was a 2019 Alfa Romeo. That's a luxury car. That car was carrying 14 boys who had just left their high school tennis team banquet. When Singh collided with the Alfa Romeo, He killed two of the boys, Drew Hassenbein and Ethan Falkowitz. Both those boys were 14 years old. The two other boys were hospitalized. They did recover from their injuries. Now, in the crash, a second car was struck. Two others were injured in that collision, but they were treated and released quickly. Singh fled on foot from the scene and was found hiding nearby, crouched near a dumpster in a parking lot of a shopping center. And here's where the horrible comment comes in. Police body cam footage caught the moments right before Singh, who had a head wound from the crash and was being placed into an ambulance. Well, Singh on the video says to one of the officers, "So what if I drink and drive? Maybe I did." Well, he did. And his actions killed two young boys. His blood alcohol content was 0.18. That's twice the legal limit in New York. On Friday, Singh pleaded guilty to aggravated vehicular homicide and driving while intoxicated. Okay, remember this happened back in May of 2023. So this was actually a reversal of a plea for Singh. He had pled not guilty to the wrong way crash. But that happens, right? The prosecutor will strike a plea deal and the plea will change. But that's not how this one went down. There is no plea deal, and there will be no reduced sentence for his cooperation. He could be sentenced to a little over 8 years to a potential 25 years for the aggravated homicide charge. He'll also be sentenced for the DWI charge. That sentencing is set for February 7th. On Friday, the relatives of Drew and Ethan packed the courtroom. They listened as the prosecutor explained to the judge that Singh was driving 95 miles an hour in a 40-mile-per-hour zone when he actually struck the car carrying the boys. The prosecutor also explained that Singh was unsteady on his feet and disoriented when found hiding by the dumpster. When Singh entered the guilty plea, he was sobbing. His lawyer told the judge that Singh understands now that drinking and driving is dangerous and that he hopes others in the community will learn from this instance. 14-year-old Drew was ranked 38th in the United States when he was killed by Singh's dangerous driving. The boys' tennis coach said the two boys were best friends and they'd been playing tennis with each other since they were 5 years old. A GoFundMe set up for the boys said the following: "Even though Drew was a nationally ranked boys player, nothing meant more to him than being a part of the Roslyn tennis community and being with his friends. Our family is devastated by his loss and is so appreciative of the incredible outpouring of support." Now, both families have established foundations in honor of their murdered sons. The Drew Hassenbein Foundation aims to help underprivileged children receive lessons and scholarships in tennis. It also helps sponsor elite junior players. The Ethan Falkowitz Foundation, well, it has similar goals. Ethan's family said he constantly sought happiness and that he tried to believe there wasn't evil in the world. They said he purposefully stayed away from dangerous activities because he just wanted to surround himself with happiness. I hope Friday brought some peace to those two boys' families. Now to the comments from Thursday's episode. Many of you were outraged that people with professions like a police officer and a teacher would rape and harm children. Maureen and J&T on YouTube, well, they both felt like the teacher deserved as many years behind bars as her cop husband. Me personally, I'm just thrilled that the sentencing structure allowed as much prison time as it did. That's, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems in child sex abuse cases. The sentencing guidelines in various states are just far too soft. And Caitlin on YouTube was disgusted that Dennis, the cop, highlighted that he felt like he was forgiven by his God. And to another case, I received some DMs explaining how some of you believe Richard Allen, okay, that's the man found guilty in the Delphi murders, is actually not guilty. Like I said, I want to hear your theories. There are wrongful convictions. So some of you seem to be questioning how just one man could have forced two girls into the ravine, and also how he could have killed both of them without one girl potentially running away or escaping. You also seem to be questioning the evidence, saying it doesn't line up just right. Now, I've read experts who question the unspent bullet, so I get it. We're just going to have to wait and watch those appeals and see if they have validity in the court system. It will take years if there is validity in the court system. That's just how these things work. Mostly those of you who sent in remarks about the Delphi murder case that, potentially believe he's not guilty, well, you just want justice for the girls, which I think we can all agree on. Libby and Abby deserve justice. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Thanks for joining me here on Rise in Crime. I appreciate my listeners. I'm so excited for 2025 and what we can accomplish together. I love your 5-star reviews and your positive comments. Please tell a friend about the podcast. That helps so much. Make sure you download, tell a friend, and that helps us get traction and grow. And you could also like and follow us on all of our social media accounts here at Oh No Media. That's Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and of course, Rise in Crime. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.